Right now, somewhere in America, a man making $90,000 a year is going broke, while a woman making $40,000 a year is quietly becoming a millionaire. Same country, same economy, same access to banks, credit cards, and the stock market. So why does one of them end up drowning in debt while the other builds real wealth in complete silence? The answer has almost nothing to do with income. It has almost nothing to do with luck. And once you understand what's actually happening behind closed doors, in bank statements nobody else ever sees, you will never look at your own paycheck the same way again. Most people believe poverty is about not having enough money. That belief feels obvious, almost too obvious to question. But if that were true, a raise would fix everything. A promotion would fix everything. Winning the lottery would fix everything. Yet study after study on lottery winners and professional athletes tells a different story. A staggering number of people who receive sudden windfalls end up financially worse off within just a few years of receiving that money. The money didn't disappear because it wasn't enough. It disappeared because the person holding it was never taught what to do with it. This is the part nobody wants to admit. Being broke and being poor are not the same thing. Broke is temporary. It's a number in a bank account on a random Tuesday. Poor is a pattern. It's a set of habits, beliefs, and decisions that quietly repeat themselves no matter how much money flows through your hands. And the most dangerous part of this pattern is that it doesn't feel like a trap while you're inside it. It feels like normal life. It feels like just the way things are, the way they've always been, the way they'll always be. To understand how this pattern forms, you have to go back to something that happened generations ago, long before any of us were born, but whose effects are still shaping bank accounts today. For most of human history, wealth was tied to land, to family name, to inheritance passed down through bloodlines. Then, over the last century, something changed. Wages became the primary way ordinary people access money. A steady paycheck replaced land as the symbol of security. And for a while, that worked. A single income could support a family, buy a home, and fund a retirement, all without much financial sophistication at all. But somewhere along the way, an entire culture built its identity around the paycheck instead of around the asset. Parents taught their children to get good grades, get a good job, and work hard, because that's what had worked for them. Nobody taught the next part. Nobody taught what to do with the money once it arrived. Financial education quietly vanished from most schools, replaced by algebra formulas most people would never use again as adults. While the single most important subject in adult life, how money actually behaves, was left completely untouched, almost as if it wasn't important at all. So generation after generation, people learned how to earn money, but never learned how to keep it, grow it, or protect it. And that gap, that one missing piece of education, is where the entire trap begins. It's not a character flaw, it's not laziness. It's an absence, a hole in the education system that nobody ever bothered to fill. And that absence has quietly cost ordinary families more money over a lifetime than almost any single bad decision they ever made. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The financial industry figured this out a long time ago, and much of modern spending culture was built to take advantage of it. Every advertisement you've ever seen was engineered by people who understand human psychology at a level most consumers never stop to consider. They know that humans don't make purchasing decisions with logic. They make them with emotion, and then they use logic afterward to justify what they already wanted to do in the first place. That's why a car commercial doesn't show you an engine. It shows you a man driving along an open coastal road at sunset, wind in his hair, confidence written across his face. You're not being sold transportation, you're being sold an identity. And once your brain associates a product with identity, price stops being the primary factor in the decision. Belonging becomes the primary factor. Status becomes the primary factor. And status, unlike a bank balance, is nearly impossible to satisfy permanently, because there's always a nicer version just one upgrade away. This is why lifestyle inflation is one of the quietest wealth killers in existence. As income rises, spending rises right alongside it, almost automatically, almost invisibly. A person gets a raise and celebrates with a nicer apartment. A bonus arrives and turns into a nicer car. A promotion arrives and suddenly weekend plans get more expensive too. None of these purchases feel reckless in the moment. Each one feels earned, deserved, reasonable, even responsible. But the collective effect is brutal. The person's net worth stays exactly where it started, no matter how much their income climbs, because every extra dollar has already been assigned a new expense before it even lands in the account. Now here's a truth that even financially educated people underestimate. Debt itself is not the villain in this story. Debt is a tool, and like any tool, it can build something or destroy something depending entirely on who's holding it and how it's used. A mortgage on a home that appreciates in value over decades is one use of debt. Financing a depreciating car with a 5 or 6 year loan is a completely different use of debt. A business loan that generates income is one use of debt. A credit card balance carried month after month to fund a lifestyle that outpaces income is a completely different use of debt. The tool is identical in every case. The outcome depends entirely on what it's used for and how long it's carried. And this is where a second invisible force enters the picture, something economists call the psychology of instant gratification. Human brains are wired to prioritize immediate rewards over long-term benefits, a tendency that made sense for most of evolutionary history, when survival depended on the present moment, not on a retirement account 40 years in the future. That wiring hasn't updated for modern life, which means every single day, millions of people are making financial decisions using a brain that was never designed to think in decades, a brain built for a world that no longer exists. This explains something that confuses a lot of people. Why do so many financially successful individuals describe delayed gratification as one of their core habits? It's not a coincidence, and it's not a personality trait some people are simply born with, while others are not. It's a skill trained over time, the same way a muscle is trained through repetition. The person who says no to an upgrade today in order to invest that same money is not smarter than everyone else. They've simply practiced overriding an instinct that was never built for long-term thinking. And like any skill, it gets easier the more it's practiced. But even understanding all of this isn't enough on its own, because there's a mistake even well-intentioned savers make, one that quietly sabotages their progress for years without them ever realizing it. It's the belief that saving money and building wealth are the same thing. They are not. Saving protects money from being spent. Investing allows money to grow. A dollar sitting in a low-interest savings account for 30 years doesn't just fail to grow meaningfully, it actually loses purchasing power over time, because prices tend to rise faster than that interest rate can keep up with. This erosion is called inflation, and it is one of the most underestimated threats to long-term financial security, precisely because it's slow and invisible rather than sudden and dramatic. Nobody panics about inflation the way they panic about a stock market crash, even though inflation, over decades, can do far more quiet damage. This is why the wealthy, historically, have never simply stored their money. They've owned pieces of things, shares of companies, real estate that generates rental income, businesses that produce revenue independent of anyone's daily labor. The difference between the wealthy and everyone else isn't usually that they work harder. It's that, at some point, their money started working alongside them, generating income even while they slept, even while they were on vacation, even while they did absolutely nothing at all. This single shift from trading time for money to owning assets that generate money is the actual dividing line between financial struggle and financial freedom. It has nothing to do with how much someone earns per hour. A surgeon earning an enormous salary, but spending every dollar as it arrives can be financially fragile despite the impressive title. A teacher earning a modest salary but consistently investing a portion of every paycheck into assets that compound over decades can retire wealthy despite the modest title. Income is what comes in. Wealth is what you keep and grow. Confusing the two is one of the most common and costly mistakes in personal finance, and it's a mistake that has nothing to do with intelligence. There's another layer to this story that rarely gets discussed, and it has to do with comparison. Human beings are social creatures, and for most of history, the people around us served as our reference point for what a normal life should look like. But something changed in the last 2 decades that broke that reference point completely. Social media didn't just connect people. It turned every single person's phone into a constant highlight reel of everyone else's best moments. Their newest purchases, their vacations, their renovated kitchens, their new cars parked in driveways. The brain doesn't process this as entertainment. It processes it as information about what normal looks like. And when normal starts to look like constant upgrading, saving money starts to feel like falling behind instead of getting ahead. This creates a quiet, invisible competition that almost nobody consciously signs up for. People aren't just spending to enjoy their lives anymore. Increasingly, they're spending to keep pace with a version of normal that was manufactured by algorithms designed to maximize engagement, not financial well-being. And the cruel irony is that the people posting the most impressive lifestyles online are often the ones under the most financial pressure behind the scenes, financing the very image that makes everyone else feel like they're falling behind. Let's make this concrete for a moment, because abstract ideas about psychology and compounding can feel distant until you see them play out in an actual life. Picture two coworkers starting the exact same job on the exact same day, earning the exact same salary. One of them decides, almost casually, to set aside a modest percentage of every paycheck into a retirement account before the money ever touches a checking account. The other plans to start investing later, once things feel more settled, once the car is paid off, once the next raise arrives, once life feels a little less tight. That second person isn't lazy or foolish. They're simply human, following an instinct that says tomorrow will somehow be easier than today. But tomorrow rarely arrives the way people expect it to. New expenses appear to fill whatever space is left. A raise arrives and gets absorbed almost instantly by a slightly nicer lifestyle. 10 years pass, then 20. And when the two co-workers finally compare notes near retirement, the gap between them isn't small. It isn't a difference of a few $1,000s. Because of how compounding works, that small, boring, consistent habit from the very beginning can end up worth dramatically more than a much larger amount invested later, simply because it had more time to grow. Time, not the size of any single contribution, turns out to be the most valuable ingredient in the entire equation, and it's the one ingredient nobody can ever go back and get more of. There's also a quieter, more personal side to this story that rarely gets discussed in conversations about money, and it has to do with unexpected emergencies. Money set aside specifically to absorb a sudden car repair, a medical bill, or a period of unemployment without derailing everything else. Families without this cushion often find themselves forced into high-interest debt the moment life throws something unexpected at them. Not because they're careless, but because there was never a buffer built in the first place. And once that high-interest debt exists, a strange thing happens. A huge portion of future income starts going toward interest payments instead of towards savings or investments, which means the emergency doesn't just cost money in the moment, it costs years of future growth that never gets the chance to happen. This is why financial stability isn't only about growing money. It's also about protecting whatever has already been built, so a single bad month doesn't erase years of quiet progress. Then there's the question of what gets passed down quietly from one generation to the next, and it's rarely just money. It's beliefs about money. A child who grows up watching a parent panic every time a bill arrives absorbs something deeper than the panic itself. They absorb the belief that money is inherently stressful, unpredictable, something to be feared rather than understood. A child who grows up watching a parent calmly set money aside every month, talk openly about saving and investing, and treat financial planning as a normal part of life absorbs a completely different belief, one that makes the entire subject feel manageable instead of terrifying. Neither child chose these beliefs consciously. They inherited them the same way they inherited a native language, simply by being immersed in it every single day. This is one of the quiet reasons financial patterns tend to repeat across generations within the same family, long after the specific circumstances that created them have completely changed. And here's where the story gets even more uncomfortable, because it's not only individual psychology working against people, it's an entire system that profits when people stay financially uninformed. Every time someone carries a credit card balance instead of paying it off in full, a company earns interest on that decision. Every time someone trades stocks impulsively based on fear or excitement instead of a long-term strategy, someone on the other side of that trade profits from the emotional decision being made. Every time someone buys an extended warranty, a subscription they forgot they even had, or a financial product they don't fully understand, money quietly moves from the uninformed to the informed. This isn't isn't a conspiracy. It's simply how markets work when one side has more financial knowledge than the other. And knowledge in this world is worth far more than most people realize. Which brings us to perhaps the most important realization in this entire story. The system was never designed to teach financial literacy widely, because widespread financial literacy would fundamentally change consumer behavior in ways that would hurt the profits of industries built on impulsive spending, high interest debt, and financial confusion. That doesn't mean there's some secret group orchestrating poverty behind closed doors. It means incentives naturally align in a direction that keeps most people uninformed, and nobody with power over that system has a strong incentive to change it, because confusion, in a strange way, is profitable for someone. So what actually breaks this pattern? Not a lottery ticket, not a single lucky investment, not a get-rich-quick idea whispered in a group chat. The pattern breaks through something far less exciting, but far more reliable. And that's the power of small, consistent decisions compounding over long periods of time. This is one of the most misunderstood forces in all of personal finance. Compounding doesn't look impressive in the early years. It looks almost boring. A small amount invested consistently barely moves for a while. But given enough time, the growth curve begins to bend upward in a way that feels almost unbelievable to someone who only just started paying attention. The tragedy is that most people give up right before that curve begins to bend, because the beginning of the journey feels far too slow to matter, and human patience simply isn't built for rewards that arrive decades later. There's a psychological trap hidden inside this waiting period too, one that deserves its own moment of attention. In the early years of building wealth, the difference between someone who is investing consistently and someone who is spending everything they earn is almost invisible from the outside. Both people might drive similar cars. Both might live in similar apartments. Both might seem to be living roughly the same life. This invisibility is dangerous because it means the person making the disciplined choice gets no immediate feedback, no applause, no visible reward for years, sometimes over a decade, while the instinct to spend gets rewarded instantly. Every single time, with a new object, a new experience, a small dopamine hit that feels good in the moment. Discipline is boring in real time and only becomes impressive in hindsight, and that timing mismatch is exactly why so many people abandon the habit before it ever has the chance to pay off. This is why financial freedom is rarely a story about a single dramatic decision. It's a story about someone who quietly decided, years before anyone noticed, to live slightly below their means, direct the difference into assets rather than liabilities, and let time do what time does best. It's unglamorous. It doesn't make for an exciting headline or an impressive story at a dinner party, but it is, statistically and historically, the most repeatable path to financial security that exists, available to almost anyone willing to start early and stay consistent. And this reframes everything we started with. The man making $90,000 a year and slowly sinking isn't lacking income. He's lacking a system, a set of habits that redirect money toward growth instead of allowing it to evaporate into lifestyle before the month even ends. The woman making $40,000 a year and quietly building wealth isn't lucky. She simply understood, maybe without even fully realizing it herself, that the goal was never to make money disappear as fast as it arrived, but to make a portion of every single dollar work long after the day it was earned. The uncomfortable truth is that staying poor, in the modern sense, rarely happens because of a lack of opportunity. It happens because of a lack of financial education, an economy engineered to encourage instant spending, a brain wired for short-term rewards, a culture that celebrates looking wealthy over actually becoming wealthy, and a digital world that constantly redefines what normal is supposed to look like. None of these forces are visible in any single moment. They only become visible when you zoom out across years, sometimes decades, and see the pattern they quietly created the entire time, hiding in plain sight, which leaves every person watching this with an uncomfortable but liberating question. Not how much do you earn, but where does every dollar go once it arrives? And is it building something that will still be there long after the paycheck stops? Because the truth this video revealed isn't really about the economy, or the banks, or some faceless system. It's about the quiet, invisible decisions made every single day. Decisions so small they rarely feel like they matter, until one day, decades from now, they turn out to have been the only thing that ever did. If this video changed the way you think about money, even slightly, that's exactly the point, because awareness is always the first step before anything else can change. Most people watch a video like this, feel that spark of recognition, and then let it fade by tomorrow morning. Don't let that be you. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this is only the beginning of a much bigger conversation about how money really works, the psychology behind every financial decision you make, and the patterns that quietly separate people who struggle from people who thrive. There's a lot more of this story still to tell, and you don't want to miss where it goes next.